Hello, beautiful people. Today we are canning russet potatoes, and in a minute I'm going to tell you why they're not the best type of potatoes to can, but why I'm doing it anyway. This is Rebecca from Simple Suburban Living. Now, russet potatoes are probably about the worst type of potato to can because they have a very high starch content, but I have a ton that I want to use up or want to preserve before they go bad. And that's one reason we can, right, is to preserve food and keep it from going bad. So it doesn't hurt to can russet potatoes, but because of the high starch content, the jars probably will be kind of cloudy and not look real clear, but the potatoes will be fine. Okay, but especially since they're russet potatoes, I'm going out of my way to get as much starch out of them as I possibly can. I started off by rinsing the unpeeled potatoes. I then peeled them, rinsed them again, actually let them soak in water a little bit and poured the water off, cubed them and had them sitting in water while I was cubing the potatoes, and actually I cut them into big chunks. But anyway, I had them sitting in water. Then I dumped off that water, rinsed them again, and now I am boiling them for about 10 minutes is how long I'm going to boil. You can see the pot hasn't come to a boil yet, but I wanted to go ahead and bring you along and show you the process that I'm doing. I'm also going to be using the Harvest Guard lids, so I have them in hot water, and I'm just going to keep them hot while I'm waiting for everything else to happen. I have some brand new jars, but I've rinsed them in hot soapy water, and I now have them in a warm oven just to keep them warm. And then what I'll be doing is I will be boiling water and using boiled water in the potatoes. So that's kind of the process that I'm doing, and I'm going to stop the camera now, finish boiling them, and then I'll show you me packing them and putting the water in and all the rest. So bring you back in just a bit. By the way, as part of my preparation, I am also heating some water in the kettle to use to fill the jars. And I also have an 8-cup Pyrex measuring container that I am going to heat water to use to fill the water. Now, I am using the Nesco canner, and it calls for 8 cups of water. I have slightly more than 8 cups there, so I'll probably dump just a little bit out. But I'm going to go ahead and heat that while the potatoes are cooking, so I'll have everything ready to go. Okay, so I have my steaming hot potatoes, my jars that have been staying warm in the oven. I have a tea kettle filled with water to fill the jars. And I have, let's see if you can see here, vinegar for wiping the rims. I have this little spatula that I'm going to use for debubbling. And I've got my lids and the gaskets, and I've got my Nesco canner. I went ahead and threw in a little bit of vinegar because I tend to forget that, and the water here is really hard and it's just awful. But you can see I have the little canning rack that comes with the Nesco canner. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first fill the jars with the hot potatoes, then I'm going to put water in, put the rings on, put them in the canner, add water to the canner, and that's basically the process that I'll be using. Okay, so we're going to start off by just filling the jars with potatoes. Let me see if I can bring it up a little higher so you can see what I'm doing. And you can see that I have these potatoes in pretty big chunks, so I cooked them for 10 minutes. I boiled them for 10 minutes before putting them in the jars. And I think maybe I need to leave 1-inch headspace, so I don't want to overdo these. And I'm going to keep filling the jars and then I'll bring you back. Okay, so now I am debubbling these. And I may have them too full. I may have to take some out, or I may need to add some in. We'll see. Or move some from one jar to another. I think one advantage to doing these cubes so big is that they don't, it's not as easy to put, you know, a couple extra potatoes in without going over the rim. So see, like this one is going up above, and so I may need to take that potato out and find a smaller one to put in its place. I think this one is. Okay, that's going to fit under better. Definitely want everything under that 1-inch headspace. I think I can put another small potato in here. Maybe even a couple of potatoes. We'll see. And like I say, if not, no big deal. I will use those potatoes for sure. Okay. I am going to, actually this one has just a little too much in it. Let me get a, you can, I don't know if you can see, but it's above the rim just a teeny bit. And so I'm gonna, whoops, now that one is. I'm just gonna pour the extra into the pot with potatoes because that won't hurt anything. Now I am making these without salt, mainly because honestly I forgot, but salt is optional. You can put salt in, you can leave it out, it doesn't really matter. Okay, now I'm going to put these gaskets and the lids on, and the way that that works is you just take the gasket and you put it on there and you make sure, oops, I forgot one thing. Before you do that, you want to make sure and wipe all of the rims. I'm wiping with vinegar. Water would probably be fine, considering that there's just water and potatoes in here, but to be on the safe side, I like to use vinegar. Okay, so I've wiped all of them. I'm going to, right now, just place all of the gaskets and the lids on. And then I'll show you how I make sure that the lid is the right tightness. So first want to make sure, I don't know if you saw, but there was part of the rubber was sticking out, and so I just made sure I got it centered right. All right. Now, the way I like to make sure that these reusable lids are on correctly is I have the lid and the gasket on, I put the ring on, and I just spin it until the jar spins. That's the reason I wanted it on this instead of the towel, okay? Because I wanted to make sure it would spin, and I don't know that it would spin on the towel. So I'm going to put this into the canner. I'm going to repeat, and then I'll show you what I'm doing with the canner. Okay, now I am using the Nesco Smart canner. So I'm going to talk you through if you're using a regular stovetop canner, but I'm going to demonstrate this because it's what I have. Now I have seen a lot of people on YouTube say to pour 4 quarts of water in, but my instruction book says 8. I don't know if things have changed or what. I got my canner fairly recently, but I'm going to follow the instructions, and I'm pouring in 8 cups of very hot water. Because again, this is a hot pack. Hot potatoes, hot jars, hot lids, and hot water. And I am turning this valve to exhaust. And then I am going to press high for high pressure. I'm doing quarts, and according to the ball book, I need 40 minutes. Kind of overdid it there. And I'm pressing start. Now what's going to happen is that the pressure needs to build up, and it will vent for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to switch the valve over to airtight. I'll bring you back when that happens. But in the meantime, I just wanted to mention that if you were doing this, for example, in your Presto canner, you'd have to follow the manufacturer instructions. Whoops. I just realized I hadn't closed the lid, so I closed the lid. And anyway, thank God for small favors, right? Okay, so you put the jars in the canner, put the water in, 8 cups according to my manual. Close the lid, make sure the valve on top is set to exhaust. Press high, put in the time, and press start. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. So we're going to wait for this little thing that's spinning around here. It'll say E10, and that is for exhaust. So I want to talk to you about how you would do this differently if you were using a Presto. You would add your hot water to the canner based on what your manufacturer says. My Presto, it is 3 quarts of water. So I would have done that. I would have put the lid on, tightened it, left the little weight off. Then when steam started coming out, I would set the timer for 10 minutes. Essentially, the same thing is happening in this canner. Once it gets up to the right amount of temperature, this will say E10. It will start venting, and I'll show you that process, and we wait 10 minutes, just like you do in the Presto. And then in this canner, once it hits that point, I switch this, let's see if I can get to it, this valve to airtight. And that is the same thing as if you were doing it in your Presto, for example, you would put the little weight on at that point after 10 minutes of venting. So that's what's going on right now, and I'll show you the process here in this canner when I get to that point. And now exhausting, the steam coming out. I don't know if you can see it, but it's been for 9 minutes. So this is countdown to E1, exhaust 1. And when it goes off, it will beep, and then I'll show you what to do at that point. Okay, and again, if you were using a Presto or a regular stovetop canner, this would be as if you had set a timer on your phone or your clock or whatever for 10 minutes. And it had 1 minute to go. So that's where we're at in the process. We're doing the exhaust for 10 minutes before we do what's equivalent to putting the weight on. So I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, you see now it says E0, it beeped. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very well, but I am switching it. Now it still says E0, and think of this as when you're using a stovetop canner, you put the weight on, but you don't immediately start counting the time until your weight starts to rock. So what's happening right now is it is coming up to the right amount of pressure before this will set to 40 minutes, because that's the time I set it for, and it will start counting down at that time. So it's in the airtight position, and the pressure is building. And again, once it hits the right amount of pressure, this will go to E40. Or excuse me, not E40, because it's no longer doing the exhaust. It will go to 40 and start the countdown process. So if you're standing there doing this with your Presto or your All-American or what have you, you'd have the weight on, but you wouldn't see it rocking yet. That's essentially the stage in the process that's happening. I'm going to pause this and bring you back when the time comes up to 40 minutes. Okay, it's now doing this, what they call the digital chase. Again, that's just an indicator that the pressure is building, and it hasn't quite come up to pressure yet. And so that's why we don't yet have 40 on the showing on here for 40 minutes. Okay, you can see now that it went to 40. So I'm going to go up to the top here, and you can see it's in the airtight position. I don't need to do anything. I just need to let it sit now. It will count down automatically for the 40 minutes. And then what will happen is I'm going to unplug. When it counts all the way down, I'm going to unplug the canner. That's basically, think of it if you were on using a stovetop canner, you would turn the heat off once the countdown happens. Okay, so you can see now it's 39 minutes left. Okay, so in 39 minutes, this is going to beep. I'm going to unplug the canner. And then something that's very important is you just let it sit. You don't turn the little weight thing to exhaust. You leave it on airtight. If you're using a stovetop canner, you don't remove the weight. You let it sit there and come down pressure naturally. So you do that, the same process for either this Nesco or for your stovetop canner. Once the time counts down, turn the heat off, whether that's turning your stove off or unplugging this canner. Let it sit and come down off of pressure naturally. In this canner, it's probably going to take about an hour. Okay, so I am going to bring you back at that time. But those are the main things to remember. Same process. Once the time counts down, take it off the heat, unplug or turn the heat off. Let it come down pressure naturally. And again, in this canner, that'll take about an hour. So I'm going to bring you back later on. See you in just a bit. See, I still have 18 minutes left, but there's something I want to show you just in case you wonder if something's wrong. You may or may not be able to see. I think so. You can certainly hear. There is steam coming out, even though it's set at the airtight position. The instruction book says that is totally fine. What is happening is just regulating the pressure. So this is not a bad thing. So I just wanted to let you know, even though it's an airtight, there may be times when the steam is coming out. It's maintaining proper pressure, so that's a good thing. All right? Okay, you can see the countdown is now down to 1 more minute. So I'm going to, I'll speed it up a little bit, but let you see what happens as it counts all the way down. You can hear that there's still some steam coming out, which is perfectly normal. Okay, I don't know if you heard it beep, but it now is going to the off position. So I'm going to unplug it. Okay, so it's unplugged and it is still in the airtight, don't know if you can see, still in the airtight position. It is going to stay in the airtight position for about an hour. I'm just going to let it sit there and come down off the pressure naturally. If you were doing a stovetop canner, you would turn the heat off and let it come down pressure naturally. In both cases, you don't want to mess with the weight. You don't want to do anything to speed up the process. It coming down off of pressure naturally is an important part of the canning process. So I'm just going to let this sit. It'll take about an hour before it comes down all the way, and I'll bring you back at that time. Okay, it has been sitting about an hour and a half, and it has come down off of pressure. So I'm going to open the canner. And it's now time for me to remove the cans. I can remove each of them. And from what I can tell, there hasn't been any siphoning, but we'll see. Comes with third one still bubbling away. And the fourth one. All right, now I'm going to let these sit for about 5 minutes. And then I'll tighten the lids. Now, if you were using regular ball or Kerr type lids, you would just let them cool for an hour, you would let them cool for 24 hours. But since I'm using the Harvest Guard reusable lids, I'm going to wait about 5 to 10 minutes and then tighten the lids, and I'll bring you back and show you that part. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes, and now I'm going to tighten all of the lids. Now, obviously the jars are very hot, so I'm using pot holders and just turning the lid, holding the jar with one pot holder, turning the lid with the other till it tightens. And let me get each of the other two done. Okay. All right. So now the lids have been tightened, and I'm going to cover the jars with a towel, and I'm going to let them sit overnight like this, and we'll check them tomorrow and see how they're doing. I'll bring you back then. Hello everyone, it is now the next day. The jars have completely cooled. I've removed all of the rings, and you can see that each of the jars sealed. So that's awesome. I'm happy about that. You can also see that the liquid in the jars is a little bit cloudy, as was expected because of the high starch content. Another thing I want to point out is down at the bottom there is basically some disintegrated potatoes. Now, I think that what happened is in the ball book it said to boil, before packing these, to boil small potato pieces for 2 minutes, or whole potatoes or large chunks for, I believe it was either 8 or 10 minutes. I think it was 10 minutes. And since I had some pretty big chunks, I thought, well, I'll do it for up at the higher end. I should have done it, I think, at a lower end, maybe 4 minutes maximum, maybe only 2 minutes, I'm not sure. So these did, I think, overcook. Well, not I think, it's obvious they did, because you can see that they're kind of all broken apart and you have some sediment at the bottom. So that's the only thing that I would do differently, is I would pre-cook the potatoes less in the future. I am planning on using these for mashed potatoes, so I'm not really concerned about the fact that they are very soft, mushy, in fact, because I will be using them for mashed potatoes. So anyway, all in all, for my first time canning potatoes and for using russets, which is not really the ideal potato, I would call this a success. I'm pleased with the results. Also, I'm still new to using these Harvest Guard lids, and yet I've been having a good success with them sealing, and so I plan to order more of those lids. So anyway, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, I would love to hear them. Please leave them below. If you haven't already done so, I'd appreciate it if you would like this video, share it, and of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the notification bell so you'll be notified each time I put out new content. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.